On a chilly morning street, a young black orphan, fueled by sheer determination, was heading to a job interview that held the potential to transform his life. An older white man, a street shoemaker, noticed his shoes were falling apart and generously offered to fix them at no cost. It was simply an act of kindness with no hidden agenda. That small act instilled in him the assurance to persevere. Years later, as Jamal rose to the heights of success as a CEO, he always remembered the man who guided him in taking that crucial first step. Before we dive into this tale, what motivates you to rise each day and continue on your journey? Your insights are always appreciated. Jamal Carter faced the chipped bathroom mirror at St. Anne's shelter, smoothing out the second-hand white shirt he'd carefully ironed the night before, using a damp towel and the pressure of his own frame. The collar felt slightly constricting, and the sleeves fell just short of his wrists, yet he deemed it acceptable. He adjusted the navy blue tie, a clip-on he'd borrowed from Pastor Reggie, and took a moment for a final inspection of himself. His gaze faltered as it landed on his shoes. The leather was flaking, and the stitching at the toe had come apart long since. The soles made a faint sound with each step, and the laces had been substituted with a piece of worn black telephone wire. These shoes had accompanied him through job fairs, the corridors of community college, and solitary walks home under the night sky. They were everything to him. Jamal let out a deep breath, then compelled himself to look beyond the floors above. Today held significance, marking his inaugural genuine job interview. At the age of 23, he had just graduated with a degree in economics from Chicago Community College, standing out as the sole member of his group at St. Anne's to emerge unscathed by a police record or shattered aspirations. He couldn't spare a moment to think about his shoes now, not when he was so near. Jamal had reached the age of 23. He spent his childhood in foster care, having lost both parents before he turned 7. For years, he had navigated the tumultuous landscape of group homes, juvenile shelters, and temporary placements. Yet against all odds, amidst the struggles, the hunger, and the harsh realities of statistics, he had managed to endure. Beyond that, he had made an effort. He engaged in his studies. He remained sober. He received a scholarship designed for youth transitioning out of the system and worked his way through community college, ultimately earning a degree in economics. He had received nothing from anyone. He had constructed his destiny from remnants. He emerged into the crisp January, fair, sharp, and invigorating. The wind twisted through the streets on the south side, carrying an ominous message. Jamal hunched into his coat and continued on his way, gripping the plastic folder containing his resume and a single printed recommendation letter as if it were fragile. The city thrummed with life, hurried pedestrians weaving through the streets, vehicles blaring their horns, and the sharp cry of the L train slicing through the air above. Yet in his realm, all was still. Each footfall resonated with an unsettling clarity, as though the city itself was privy to the narrative woven by his shoes. He was midway to the station when the sound reached his ears. Absolutely not. You can't just stride into your future like that, young one. The tone was gruff, yet still warm. Jamal shifted his gaze. A white man, perhaps in his 60s, sat on a folding stool beside a weathered rolling cart, clad in layers of canvas and denim. His hands, clad in fingerless wool, cradled a weathered leather boot that he was diligently repairing. A quaint handcrafted sign rested against his cart. Walter Green, fix and mend, if you are able. The man narrowed his eyes at Jamal through a set of worn glasses, then gestured toward his feet. No, those things are lamenting. Do you perceive that sound? That sound isn't leather squeaking. Your future is pleading for compassion. He flashed a grin, then gave the crate before him a friendly, "Pat, approach me. I won't ask for any payment. It's not fair to allow someone to chase after hope while carrying a broken spirit." Jamal paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. He surveyed his surroundings. Individuals moved past them without a moment's hesitation. His intuition urged him to continue on his path, yet there was an element in the man's voice, piercing, genuine, oddly recognizable, that compelled him to halt. He approached slowly and settled onto the overturned milk crate that Walter had nudged in his direction. The elderly gentleman leaned closer, revealing a curved needle, a length of waxed thread, and a tiny metal clamp. His movements were deliberate, refined. Jamal observed quietly as the man meticulously cleaned the toe cap, carefully pressed the leather back into position, and started to stitch with precision. "Interview?" Walter inquired, his gaze fixed elsewhere. Jamal acknowledged with a nod. "Indeed, a beginner position at a footwear company, can you?" "Imagine." Walter let out a derisive snort. "It's amusing how life aligns at times. Footwear accompanies us on every journey, yet we seldom express our gratitude, until they crumble into pieces." The man's hands flowed gracefully over the shoe. Jamal observed the pronounced creases etched into his skin, the yellowed beard bearing the traces of smoke, and the charred remnants on the cuff of his jacket. "A man accustomed to heat and pressure," he mused. "A man who grasped the essence of both." "Are you local to this area?" Jamal finally inquired. Walter gave a slight shrug. "In every place and yet in no place at all, truly. I once operated a shop on 63rd Ave. It all fell apart when the prices soared. Long before anyone took notice of vintage leather and genuine spirits, I address what I can, whenever I have the opportunity." With a careful hand, he secured the final stitch and then raised the shoe delicately. "Let's find out if she takes another step." He carefully placed the shoe back on Jamal's foot, secured the improvised laces, and gave the heel a gentle tap. Jamal rose to his feet, took a step forward, then retreated a step back. The shoe endured. Walter's smile unfolded slowly, a contented expression that appeared to ease the burden from his worn shoulders. He gazed up at Jamal, his eyes sharper than they had been, and said, "Don't allow those shoes to hinder you from following the right path. Perseverance is key. Your future awaits you at that place." Jamal paused, allowing the words to envelop him, much like a comforting cup of tea warms the soul. He inclined his head with deliberation. "Thank you," he murmured softly. Walter merely gestured with a hand wave. "Start moving. You've got destinations to reach. Dreams are not patient." Jamal pivoted and resumed his stride, his shoes now silent. While his heart beat just a touch more audibly, he kept moving forward, never glancing back. Yet he sensed a change, as though a fragment of his narrative had just been woven into place. This time, it would endure. Jamal reached the Wexford Footwear headquarters, with just 4 minutes left to go. The structure towered over him, reminiscent of a realm beyond his own. Shimmering glass and sleek steel, impeccably refined, radiate warmth in the crisp morning light. He halted at the spinning doors, glanced at his image in the dark glass, then directed his gaze to his footwear. The stitching was apparent, yet sturdy. The sole remained intact. They appeared sincere, and for a change he felt no urge to offer an apology on their behalf. The lobby exuded an air of silence and sterility. The floor shimmered as if it were a tranquil pool of water. Individuals strode, with determination, their high-end footwear producing a rhythmic click, reminiscent of a finely tuned mechanism. Jamal moved ahead, his demeanor calm yet resolute, and stated his name at the reception desk. The woman at the counter hardly glanced his way, yet she gestured for him to take a seat in a line of leather chairs by the elevator bank. He sat rigidly, his hands placed on the plastic folder that lay across his lap. Surrounding him were 3 additional candidates, 2 males and 1 female. They appeared more mature, refined, each adorned in bespoke jackets and gleaming loafers. One of the men cast a quick look at Jamal's shoes, a smirk playing on his lips, before returning to his phone with disinterest. Jamal chose to overlook it. He was not concerned with another's comfort to determine his value. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and paused in anticipation. As his name echoed through the air, he rose with a calm assurance, trailing the HR assistant through a labyrinth of glass corridors into a cozy conference room adorned with windows. 3 individuals were already present, 2 women and 1 man, all dressed in professional attire in their mid-40s, exuding sharpness and clean smiles. The woman at the center leaned in, reaching out her hand. "Mr. Carter, I appreciate you taking the time to be here today." Grateful for the chance, Jamal expressed as he shook each hand in succession. The interview commenced with the standard inquiries regarding background, education, skills, and prior work experience. Jamal responded with clarity, focusing on his knowledge, his degree, the warehouse jobs he undertook to provide for meals, his strong work ethic, and the reality that he graduated without family support, safety nets, or excuses. Next arrived the more challenging phase. What makes Wexford special? A question was posed by the man on the panel. Each month we receive a multitude of applicants. What qualifies you for this role? Jamal paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. His grip on the folder tightened for a moment before easing up. He might choose to fabricate a narrative about brand alignment, the potential for long-term growth, or the promise of upward mobility. Or he could reveal the truth, the complete, unvarnished, unedited version. He met their gaze and spoke, "For I understand the struggle of navigating life with worn-out shoes." A moment of silence ensued. The members of the panel shared knowing looks. "I don't just mean it in a literal sense," he continued, "although mine were until roughly an hour ago. A man on the street, Walter, repaired them at no cost. He simply informed me without any request. Don't allow your footwear to hinder you from traversing the correct path. I'm here to create footwear that propels individuals ahead rather than restraining them. Individuals like myself who have never experienced a smooth path in life. A good pair of shoes can hold immense value when you're left with little else." The room was silent. The woman in the center drummed her pen rhythmically against the table. Then she inquired, "Are you referring to empathy?" Jamal acknowledged with a nod. "I'm discussing intention. If I'm in the back, stacking boxes or tracking inventory, I want to do it with the understanding that the products we create aren't solely for those who can spend $500 on sneakers. I aspire to contribute to a cause that empowers individuals to rise with confidence." A profound stillness ensued, enveloping everything around. Then the gentleman reclined in his seat. He spoke softly, indicating that what you provided goes beyond a mere resume for our evaluation. The remainder of the interview unfolded, yet the atmosphere had shifted. The inquiries transformed from being mechanical to embodying a sense of curiosity. They inquired about his approach to pressure, his strategies for enhancing warehouse logistics, and his perspective on the ethics of the supply chain. Jamal responded with measured clarity. He had no intention of impressing anyone. His aim was simply to convey honesty, to be recognized not as a liability, but as an individual who understood the importance of foundational efforts. In the end, they rose and extended their hands once, more for a firm shake. No guarantees, only a commitment to excellence, yet a change was evident. He perceived it within their gaze. After a half hour, he emerged from the building. The chill enveloped him once more, yet this time it lacked its usual bite. He strolled down the familiar street he had traversed that morning, shoes steady against the pavement, shoulders squared. No matter what unfolded afterward, whether there was a call or not, he was certain of one thing. He entered without a hint of shame, and he departed transformed. It took a fortnight for the call to finally arrive. Jamal sat in the modest computer lab of the shelter, assisting an older resident with the setup of an email account. Suddenly, his phone vibrated in his pocket, displaying an unfamiliar number. He paused for a moment, cast a quick look at the man next to him, then politely made his way into the hallway. The voice on the other end carried a polished tone, precise yet inviting. Wexford extended an offer for the role of logistics assistant in warehouse operations, set to commence on Monday at 8 a.m. The compensation may not have been substantial, yet it included perks, transit reimbursement, and above all a stepping stone. Initially he remained quiet, absorbing the conversation, blinking occasionally as he allowed the words to sink in. He spoke softly, expressing his gratitude, promising not to squander it. Once he ended the call, he lingered for a while, the familiar tile floor underfoot, feeling unexpectedly more solid, as if some unseen force had realigned the very fabric of reality. On his first day, Jamal arrived 15 minutes early, sporting a button-down shirt and slacks he had purchased from a second-hand store just that weekend. The shoes, still bearing Walter's touch, had been meticulously cleaned and polished using a borrowed rag and a dash of coconut oil, a tip from someone at the shelter who claimed it outperformed any commercial shine. He entered through the employee entrance with a calm assurance, acknowledged the security guard with a nod, and proceeded to the back offices. The warehouse thrummed with activity, forklifts darting about, crates towering overhead, labels zipping through machines like a flurry of ticker tape. Jamal found himself under the guidance of Maria Vasquez, a pragmatic woman in her 50s who cut through the fluff and had an expert grasp of her systems. She demonstrated the steps for scanning packages, tracking shipments, and processing returns. The task was intricate and demanding, the sort that left your muscles sore while simultaneously honing your thoughts. Jamal absorbed the conversation, posed insightful questions, and meticulously recorded every detail. As the week drew to a close, Maria took him aside and whispered, "You're not just in it for the paycheck, are you?" He grinned. "No, Mum. I'm doing it to ensure I never return to my origins." He lingered long after others had left. He meticulously arranged shelves that were never requested of him. He corrected the labeling mistakes that had slipped under the radar. Upon encountering a delay in delivery, he took the initiative to reroute it through a smaller regional center, acting independently without prior notification. Little details. However, they accumulated. He acquired names. He recalled the significance of birthdays. He inquired with the cleaning staff about the well-being of their children. He acted without seeking recognition. He did it because each moment on that floor carried significance, as if he was proving his worth to continue moving forward. Half a year in, he presented a concept during a team meeting. The company had been discarding damaged returns, shoes that bore minor scuffs or had misprinted logos, yet were otherwise entirely wearable. Jamal suggested establishing a reclaim rack, where staff members could take the initiative to clean and organize salvageable pairs for donation to local shelters and youth programs. He even volunteered to take charge of it himself on weekends. The proposal received courteous acknowledgments, followed by a hush. 2 days later, he found himself summoned to a meeting with an executive he had yet to encounter, Andrea Whitaker, leader of community development. She requested that he clarify his plan once more. He certainly did. She absorbed the words, reclined in her chair, and remarked, "Let's take it for a test run. You'll have a duration of 3 months." Jamal toiled through the night to develop the program. He collaborated with local non-profits, enlisted volunteers, established a straightforward database, and secured corporate approval for transportation of donated goods. By the conclusion of the quarter, more than 700 pairs of shoes were redistributed throughout the city. The effect was undeniable, apparent, quantifiable, and before long, individuals began to see Jamal not merely as the newcomer, but as someone whose thoughts deserved attention. Advancements didn't happen instantly, but they did arrive. Logistics coordinator, inventory lead, assistant manager. With every new role, Jamal infused the same determination, the same commitment to support both the organization and the individuals it impacted. He proposed modifications to the tracking software that reduced supply turnaround times by several days. He revised the onboarding handbook for new hires to enhance clarity and fairness. He championed a bilingual signage system in the warehouse to assist Spanish-speaking workers, and he consistently wore his first pair of repaired shoes on Fridays, a subtle vow to himself. As time went by, the organization evolved, and so did Jamal. He secured his own apartment, and then upgraded to an even better one. He began guiding interns, many of whom brought to mind the boys from St. Anne's. He returned to school in the evening to pursue an MBA. He stored a photograph of his graduation day in his locker, standing alone on stage, clutching the diploma as if it were a cherished companion. Exactly 10 years after his initial entry into that interview room, Wexford unveiled a new product line, Foundation Sole, featuring durable, affordable, and stylish shoes tailored for working-class communities, school districts, and disaster relief initiatives. Jamal spearheaded the team responsible for its design, constructed the distribution network, and established the outreach partnerships. During the product launch, the CEO highlighted him as a prime example of the values this company embodies. Flashes of cameras illuminated the scene, applause erupted. Yet Jamal's thoughts wandered to distant places. His mind was consumed by thoughts of the man with the cart, the needle, and the haunting words that lingered endlessly. Don't allow those shoes to hinder your journey down the right path. Now he was traversing it, with greater strength, further distance and a steadier pace, and it was time to retrace his steps and seek out the one who had guided him to take that initial significant step. For weeks following the launch of Foundation Soul, Jamal felt a persistent heaviness nestled behind his ribs, a subtle, unresolved resonance that haunted his nights. The speeches concluded, the photos released, the accolades both humbling and ephemeral. What remained was the visage he hadn't encountered in 10 years, the voice that had resided in his mind like a guiding star. Don't allow those shoes to hinder your journey down the right path. He had made countless attempts to locate Walter in those formative years when his designation still read coordinator and his finances were barely sufficient. However, the leads had vanished and the names became indistinct. A new organic grocer had taken over the corner on 53rd. The stoop where Walter once mended spirits now stood, obstructed by scaffolding and city permits. In that moment, it seemed like pursuing something intangible, while existence continued its relentless pace. Yet after a decade, there was an undeniable part of Jamal that clung to it. He freed up his Saturday and began anew, navigating the city with his feet as if it were a map imprinted in his mind. He made his way back to 53rd and Ellis, pausing in the soft glow of dawn, and waited. No one showed up. He strolled 2 blocks to the east, inquiring as he went. In a barber shop, an elderly gentleman faintly recalled a white man who handcrafted leather, storing his tools in a worn laundry cart, exceedingly polite, who vanished some time ago. At the bus terminal, a witness remembered seeing him distribute shoes to a teenager during the winter, suggesting he may have had ties to a shelter. Downtown, Jamal traced the narrative. He paused at shelters, churches, and warming centers, inquiring about any records associated with the name Walter Green. No one had a complete answer, but a kind soul at a soup kitchen on 63rd ultimately pointed him in the right direction. Consider visiting the outreach clinic located on Halsted. They collaborate with individuals of that nature, the reserved ones, who once held a sense of pride but have since lost their foundation. Jamal proceeded, lingered, and inquired once more. After 3 additional weekends spent walking, observing the weathered faces, and conversing with case managers burdened by overflowing files and weary eyes, one afternoon, just as he was about to exit the community center on Halsted, a staff member called out to him from behind. "Hold on, are you searching for Walter?" An elderly gentleman around 60, though now likely in his 70s, previously employed to repair footwear. Jamal turned slowly, his heart pounding against his ribs as if it recalled something long before his mind could catch up. "Indeed," he remarked. "That individual," the employee acknowledged with a nod. "On Thursdays, he dedicates his time to volunteering, conducting a trade workshop for those re-entering, with a calm demeanor and meticulous attention to detail. It's hard to believe he once called the streets home just a few years back." Jamal returned on that Thursday. The air was thick with the rich aroma of leather intertwined with the deep scent of freshly brewed coffee. 6 folding tables were set up, each occupied by 3 men, all bent over an assortment of shoes, boots, and scraps of fabric. At the far end, a man in a tan work jacket stood, his silver hair tied back at the nape of his neck. He was focused on a cracked pair of boots, threading a curved needle with the same practiced patience that Jamal had observed. A decade earlier, he glided across the room with a deliberate slowness, as if navigating through a thick, viscous substance. Walter paused in his stitching, his eyes narrowing against the gentle glow of the lights as he gazed intently. For a brief instant, silence reigned. No smile, no acknowledgement. Then the needle slipped from his grasp. "Child." Jamal nearly chuckled. "At that, I'm no longer a child," he murmured gently. "Indeed. Here I am." Walter blinked, his expression shifting, not due to the passage of time, but from a sudden understanding. He remarked, You have experienced what it's like in those shoes. Did you not? Jamal acknowledged with a nod, completely and without reservation. As the class concluded, they emerged into the open air, the sun starting its descent behind a row of somber grey structures. Walter rested against the railing, his hands tucked away in the pockets of his coat. He appeared older indeed, yet not lessened, consistently unwavering. Silence lingers. Jamal expressed that he had been searching for you for many years. I wish to express my gratitude to you. Walter gave a nonchalant shrug. You just accomplished that. No, Jamal declined with a shake of his head. That falls short. He shared with Walter all the details, the job, the promotions, the program they had developed, and the new line of shoes, each seam infused with intention. As he spoke the name Foundation Soul, Walter exhaled softly. One hand pressed to his mouth as if a sacred truth had been revealed. You created all of this, he whispered, with just a pair of mended shoes. Jamal beamed with delight. Negative. I created it because there was someone who had faith in me when I struggled to have faith in myself. Walter remained quiet for an extended period. He then turned and said, I don't have family, Jamal. I never lingered in one place long enough to create one. Jamal acted without a moment's pause. Indeed you do, he remarked. That evening he extended an invitation to Walter for dinner. Simple yet profound, a cozy setting, a hearty meal, and two individuals who shared a silent understanding of the significance of the moment. Later, Jamal took him back to his apartment, where a second bedroom was already prepared for him. He never invited Walter to take up residence. He expressed that he was welcome. After a prolonged, bewildered pause, Walter finally uttered the one thing that truly counted. Very well then. Shall we journey down this path side by side? Absolutely. Due de la fan, 5 hohenchen, viet leide du va bam sat hoenton, kichban yuban, yukau, baugom kakchiti et quantron, Jamal nan Walter lamchan oiva, kamso kongden het kwang doi kan lai. Jamal lapui boltes ben chang nu trandonigok, boy ramat don gie foundation sol. Boy by fatbia kandong, ying hang ket tuk chiao ning kia, tin tai. So el Walter remained right where he was. He had no reason to. What started as a straightforward gesture, a couch for the night, a warm meal, a long overdue thank you, transformed into something neither dared to label initially, yet both eventually grasped completely. The second bedroom was designated for him. A serene environment, part creative haven, part sanctuary. His instruments resumed their everyday function. Jamal arranged the lighting meticulously, sourced the highest quality leather available, and ensured that the radio consistently played smooth, static-free jazz in the background. There was no grand event, no proclamation, just a serene, gentle merging of one existence into another. They crafted their days with a certain cadence, mornings filled with coffee and neatly folded newspapers, afternoons dedicated to leisurely strolls or trips to local shelters, and evenings immersed in the tactile world of rubber soles and cherished memories. Walter rediscovered his sense of purpose, not merely in mending shoes, but in restoring people's dignity, one stitch at a time. As news of his efforts circulated, educators contributed bags filled with student sneakers. A firefighter donated a pair of boots that had belonged to his father in the 70s, and while Walter repaired them all, Jamal ensured the flow continued. One evening, in the quiet of the kitchen, devoid of music and an audience, the two of them sat together, sharing leftover stew. Jamal glanced across the table and declared, I want to make it official. I want you to be my father. Walter blinked, his spoon suspended in the air. He remained silent for an extended period, and then, with a voice that was soft and slightly trembling, he asked, Are you certain about that, son? Jamal simply nodded, acknowledging that the paper captures the essence of reality. A week later, the paperwork was completed, legal, notarized, sealed. Jamal Carter, son of Walter Green. From that day forward, Walter referred to him not as the kid who found me or my friend from the city, but simply as my boy. With Walter by his side, Jamal pressed ahead with a fresh perspective, aiming not only for footwear but for transformation. He established Walter's bench, a charitable endeavor honoring Walter, creating a network of community stations in underprivileged areas where individuals could access free shoes or acquire the skills of shoe repair. At every bench, a volunteer would be present, either trained by Walter himself or by someone he had guided, imparting not just skills, but, more crucially, the message that no one is too broken to rise again. The debut of Foundation Soul, Wexford's latest shoe line crafted for working-class families and individuals enduring challenges, marked an unforgettable moment for Jamal. At the press event, he stood before a gathering of investors, journalists, and community leaders, not clad in a suit, but in the same shirt he wore to his very first interview and the same pair of shoes that Walter had mended a decade ago. He raised them and remarked, "The moment these shoes were mended was when I understood it wasn't merely the leather that required repair. I sought more than mere employment. I longed for someone to see my value and hold me close. Walter didn't offer me any assistance. He provided me with a motivation to continue my journey." The atmosphere was still. Then the applause erupted, not merely courteous but vibrant, resonating with an authenticity that transcended mere brand allegiance. That evening, Jamal chose to forgo the after-party. Instead, he returned home. Walter sat outside on the wooden bench that Jamal had crafted from old warehouse pallets, a mug of coffee cradled in his hand, observing the neighborhood kids as they played near the sidewalk. Jamal crouched next to a small gathering, demonstrating to one of the boys the technique to loop his laces and secure them firmly. Walter observed him with a subtle grin, reminiscent of the expression he'd worn when he first threaded that curved needle through a torn sole. Not a single word escaped his lips. There was no necessity for him to do so. He reclined on the bench, sunlight cascading over his features, savoring his coffee. Not a father by blood, but a guiding force at a pivotal moment, the kind that leaves an indelible mark, the kind that stays with you for a lifetime.